Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Top 10 edition of Magic Mics, proudly sponsored by our Patreon supporters and CoolStuffInc.com, where you can find cool stuff in stock every day. And check out our co-sponsor, CardHoarder.com, offering the best inventory prices and delivery of cards for Magic Online. And check out our Altar Sleeves. Support the show by using the code MAGICMICS at checkout for 5% off anything in the store. We have a brand new sleeve coming out just for patrons. Patrons, check that inbox. You should have an invite for a free, awesome sleeve featuring us.
I got him here too.
As the spoopies.
As the spoopiness. Complete with a hammy in there too. So that's super
skeletons.
Cool. Yes, it is. It is wonderful. And it's
Send
Ruben's
shivers
just
down my spine.
Ruben decided not to dress up. We don't know why.
Yeah.
He just
they just I just my life is already enough of like a Halloween
it
that
turns
I just
out,
decided that they were like, just use your driver's license photo.
Okay, let's see. I'm Evan Irwin, and we get started each week by saying hello to my two co-hosts, MTG Nerd Girl.
Hey, guys.
And Ruben Bressler.
Happy Halloween month.
That's right. It's
Woo.
spooky all the time. Well, we also begin with our choice of the top comment from last week in a segment we call Honorable Mention, where Ruben will tell us who was the most eloquent, letting us know what card we did not choose as one of our top 10 transform and flip cards. Ruben?
Well, Spencer Ward stuck out this week, long time and I believe second time winner of the comment of the week. You know what they say about 3 mana planeswalkers? And Liliana, Heretical Healer, was no exception. 1 BB for a 2/3 lifelink could have potentially seen some standard play on its own, but when you play Magic, she transforms. And when she does, it's almost as if she gets to use 2 abilities on the same turn. One of those even protects her. I have fond memories of flip, make a 2/2, everyone discard a card, and your opponent begins to lose hope.
It's pretty crazy. Liliana Heretical Healer was from Magic Origins. It was a black and a generic mana for a 2/3 legendary human cleric, which is mythic, of course. It has lifelink, and whenever another non-token creature you control dies, you exile her and then return her to the battlefield transformed under her owner's control. And if you do, you put a 2/2 black zombie creature token onto the battlefield. This is the story of her brother turning into a zombie. And then on the back is Liliana Defiant Necromancer. It has 3 loyalty, and it says +2, each player discards a card, -X, return target non-legendary creature card with converted mana cost X from your graveyard to the battlefield, and -8, you get an emblem with a quote, whenever a creature dies, return it to the battlefield under your control at the beginning of the next end step. This thing was a powerhouse. Basically, all 5 of them were in that cycle from varying degrees, but like this one still was up there. It's very scary.
Was very popular in the sort of sacrifice rally style decks as just a way to gain additional value and not have to have more creatures on the board. A great way to survive a wrath is to, have a sacrifice outlet, flip your Liliana, and still have a big board, but, keep putting on the pressure, especially against control decks.
Yeah. So, congratulations to Spencer Ward. Please contact us on social media for your prize. Thanks again to CoolStuffInc.com for sponsoring this giveaway. And stay tuned for our top 10 list this week, and maybe you can win next week's free gift certificate. Because it is time to talk about the top 10 OG Theros cards, and once again, through no fault of our own, MTG Nerd Girl only looked at Theros, which is good because that's kind of the only set you really need to look at.
Yeah, exactly.
For the whole block. I think I might have one from a different set. Yeah, I got one.
I believe I looked and I have 1 card from Born of the Gods and no cards from Journey into Nyx.
I don't.
So what I could have done is just not told you the truth.
Right.
And you guys might have just thought that I
just really like that one set.
Yeah.
I have 1 card
Correct.
from Journey into Nyx, which we get to talk about. And it's actually, you know what? Segue. It's my number 10, y'all. Oh, man, look at that. Like we scripted it. Crazy. Well, there was one good thing. Look, back in the day, there's some old school cards that Wizards has just decided not to print anymore. And it's kind of weird to me. And when they did functionally reprint it, they haven't really printed it again. They put it into a Commander Legends product, which as a mythic, which was great. But it looks to be the buy a box promo for Commander Legends. And it's the remake of City of Brass in Mana Confluence. Mana Confluence. This card's like $20+. Mana Confluence is a rare from Journey into Nyx, which is a land that says tap, pay 1 life, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. Very simple, very straightforward. Honestly, I expected this thing to be reprinted 2 or 3 times by now. Why isn't it in like rando commander decks and things? But instead, it's a $20 card that's just hanging out there. Wait.
So you mentioned like really simple. One of the things I wanted to say, like when looking through the cards and making my top 10 list, like I was realizing, there was some interesting mechanics introduced in the set, like in the whole block, but like there's still a lot less text on the cards. Like they still managed to describe or explain. They did interesting, unique things, but yet most of the cards are just like one or two sentences. And I'm just like, oh, I miss it.
Yeah.
Isn't it nice? We could like to see big words and big fonts and stuff.
Right. And flavor text.
I don't remember having less fun. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's just...
And this card in particular, I mean, City of Brass was a all-star, multi-time Pro Tour winning card for a decade. And then they printed a version that functions within Magic rules. Like, previously we had City of Brass, which put a triggered ability on the stack that you could respond to, and people still do to this day in Legacy and Vintage. Like, at 1 life, tap City of Brass, storm out kind of deals.
Yeah, it does go on the stack. For those...
And this is a much better, much cleaner, better way to do it.
Now, for those who don't know, City of Brass came out all the way in Arabian Nights. Man, I love this card. It's like, Jesus Christ, it's $1,300 for an original one. Oh my God. Oh, I'm hurting. City of Brass is still a $20+ card these days. I guess you can get one in 5th edition for $18 because they're ugly. But
Wow.
It does say whenever City of Brass becomes tapped, it deals 1 damage to you, tap to add 1 mana of any color. So that whenever it does go on the stack and you can do stuff. But like, what was wrong with City of Brass? I love that card.
That's what was wrong with it. It's horrendously worded.
Messed up.
It's
man.
complicated for new players.
Like,
And this is the way that Painlands are worded, which, by the way, it's named in such a way that they could put it in like an Alara set or something.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to put 5-color lands in Standard. So
man, it's how they sold Modern Masters. It was the box image for Modern Masters was that insane City of Brass, and they just have not reprinted it since. That's crazy. All right. Anyway, Ruben, what's your number 10?
My number 10 is a card that I have a lot of fond memories of. It may not have won a ton of major tournaments, although it won more major tournaments than you might expect. It won at least 2 Star City Games Opens. It won me a bunch of FNMs. It won me a bunch of drafts when I got lots of copies of them because it was a common and nobody wanted a Crowan Crusader. A Crowan Crusader is a red mana for a 1/1 common human soldier that says Heroic. When you cast a spell that targets a Crowan Crusader, create a 1/1 red soldier creature token with haste. There was a combo with this, although you didn't need to combo with this, with, I believe, Jeskai Ascendancy and Retraction Helix.
Yeah,
where you get
yeah.
an infinite number, and then also Sylvan Caryatid and like Springleaf Drum and Briber's Purse and some weird. It was a very weird combo deck that involved a lot of untapping and tapping triggers. But I played this in a deck that was just red creatures. It was just this and Dragon's Mantle and Foundry Street Denizen. And, 1/1s for 1 as far as the eye can see. This was Boss Heroic, I think, was what we called it. Or
Nice.
it was a Tom Ross creation, obviously.
Right.
And yeah, I had a lovely time with this card.
It was pretty good in Limited. I liked the the Heroic in Limited. I liked the Boros with the Pegasus and this card, and you were able to just go really wide. And that was fun magic.
Mhm.
And again, like, it felt more watered down compared to the current text boxes that we're seeing. And I love this set in Limited, to be honest.
Yeah, same.
I think I came back to this set after a long break. And I remember it was like the most fun I'd had in a very long time.
Nice. Yeah, this
The
is...
flavor... Sorry, go ahead.
No, please.
I was just going to say, I mean, we'll almost certainly talk about some monstrosity cards later. I don't know how many heroic cards are going to be on our list after this one, so this feels like the opportunity to talk about the story that's being told between heroes and monsters. Because in the classic Greek story, the hero is powering up. Then the monster has a big moment where it like transforms and grows extra heads, and then the hero finally takes it down in an epic. And both of those abilities told the story of what the heroes and the monsters do so cleanly that you might not have even noticed it if it wasn't, spelled out.
I mean, this was, one of those really nice sort of classic ways of explaining mechanics through story and story through mechanics and not bonking you over the head with it. You know what I mean? It's like, if you cared enough, if you think about it enough, you'll go, oh, it makes a lot of sense, don't it? That's really cool. Nerd Girl, what's number 10?
So my number 10, I tried to stay a little bit away from like the limited aspect because it's not super relevant for these retro type top 10s because we're not going to get to go back and play that limited format very often. So my cards that I chose are things that were impactful at the time and or still have some impact here in the aftermath of the set. And my number 10 is Anger of the Gods.
Nice.
So this was a card that, saw a lot of play in the format. It was great against the aggro stuff. And I believe it's still seeing like some play in like random modern stuff. Mm-hmm. So Anger of the Gods is a colorless red for a sorcery. It deals 3 damage to each creature. If a creature dealt damage this way would die, exile it instead. So it's just a really clean sweeper for low to the ground decks. And again, like I said, we're still seeing this in some modern decks here and there. So it's pretty game-changing card.
If you wanna let me age myself a little bit, because that's what we do here. Back in my day, when we walked uphill both ways, there was a little card called Flamebreak. Flamebreak showed up in Darksteel. It's 3 red for a rare sorcery that deals 3 damage to each creature without flying and each player. And creatures dealt damage this way can't be regenerated, because that was a thing back in the day. Yeah. Had to stop that troll ascetic with Flamebreak. But Anger of the Gods was fantastic. Anger of the Gods, like, it showed up when it needed to, which was, please God, give us something to kill fairies with. This killed fairies and made fairies die. Now, it didn't kill all of them, thanks, Wizards, but it's fine. Wow. It killed a whole lot of them, and that was important.
Yeah, this card also very popular in Historic now that it's legal there, especially in those Jeskai control decks that are, I think, the most popular deck in Historic right now.
It's one of them.
3 mana red sweepers like this are few and far between. It seems like Wizards doesn't like giving us this or Fire Spout or Flamebreak very often, and when they do, they don't always come with upside. Sometimes they're like Sweltering Suns, which I guess has upside in that you can cycle it for 3 colorless, but this is able to take out Prized Amalgams and Bloodghasts and Anger of the Gods. If I'm being real, probably the best red card from Theros block.
Maybe. I mean, I could see that, all things considered.
I also wouldn't run it in any of my red decks, so out of pure protest, I don't have it on my list.
I mean, this is the type of card that like helps define a format. Like, there are things that you really can't do on a high level competitively when this card exists. Like, you can't really go wide with token decks and strategies when something like this is just sitting out there and is just going to wreck you, and or you do that with a very specific plan on how to solve it in your sideboard. All right, let's move on here to number 9. Mine is higher on someone else's list, and that's okay because it's dope. Ruben, what's number 9?
I've got another red card, because this really wasn't Red's era, but I wanted to make sure I got some red cards in here. And this one, to me, I feel like, a lot of the gods got their time in the sun. Not exactly Heliod, the god of the sun, but like Thassa was good for a while, and then Nissa was good, and Erebos had its moment. And then even like Iroas had a minute where it was fine, but I feel like the baseline popularity of Purphoros, God of the Forge, never really waned. It was always like the second or third best god up to today, where it might be the best god in Commander. 3 colorless and a red gets you a legendary enchantment creature god who's a 6/5 with indestructible and says, as long as your devotion to red is less than 5, Purphoros isn't a creature. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, Purphoros deals 2 damage to each opponent. Hello, Commander. 2 colorless and a red, creatures you control get +1/+0 until end of turn. So obviously a very popular commander in like red token strategies, alongside things like Krenko and Siege Gang Commander, Norrin the Wary, anything of that nature.
Purphoros was a lot of fun. I liked opening it in limited, and like anything in this set is just really, really good in limited. Sometimes the devotion stuff was a little bit on the difficult side, but for the most part, the abilities kind of made up for it. So yeah, I liked Purphoros a lot, and I agree, it's still one of the more used gods. And that type of flavor or flair is always going to be really good for like EDH and stuff too. So yeah, this is a great addition to the top 10 for sure.
Yeah, Purphoros, a hell of a magic card. This thing is over $16 for a reason, even though it never really saw that much play in Constructed as I recall. It's also one of those cards you're just like, that card's worth what? Because you never saw it on the top, competitive tables, but it was all over the judge tables over there where they were playing EDH.
There was, it was played, but it was always a tier 2 strategy. I believe that Channel Fireball's team deck for the Theros Pro Tour was a Purphoros Red Devotion kind of deck.
Was it?
1 or 2 copies of it made the top 8. There was like a red-green kind of rampy thing that also took advantage of Purphoros. It's just a good creature.
It's a fun card.
But it was overshadowed by mono-blue devotion, mono-black devotion.
Right.
It always was sort of, second fiddle. But it certainly has the lasting power. All right.
Nerd Girl, what's number 9?
So my number 9 is actually just a common, but it's been reprinted enough. I thought it was really fun, and it's always very fun for me in Limited. It's the type of spells I like to play, but then also you can see some constructed play in this and definitely some sideboard play as well, and that is God's Willing.
Wonderful.
Something that we just that was the one that was just reprinted, right?
Mm-hmm. I think so. And
so Strixhaven for the Mystical Archives.
Mm-hmm.
So God's Willing for 1 white. Target creature gains protection of a color of your choice until end of turn and scry 1. So this is just a nice thing to sideboard in. It protects some of your bigger threats. It's always something that you're going to see in Limited. It's going to be a kind of a sweet gotcha. And the better your cards are, like your creatures, bigger, creatures that you have to protect, the more valuable a spell like this is.
When you're in that type of environment and you have this type of spell, because this is a very common type of spell, you'll see this a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And they'll tack on various stuff from time to time, sometimes a set mechanic or whatever. But when you see a card like this and you think about what your best creature or your best threat happens to be for your seal deck, it's super important, but also for your draft decks. Learning to not run out your best card the instant you have the mana for it, and to wait that one extra turn to have this up ready for it. Like there's a very sort of part of people, when they learn to play competitively and they sort of unlock these different sort of skill sets and these ideas that they didn't have before, which is like, obviously I got to run my best thing as soon as I can because it's my best thing. And you go, no, saving your best thing from their best removal spell because they're going to use their best removal spell on your best threat. That is what is important here. And it just unlocks the next level for a Magic player when I see stuff like that happen.
It also synergizes with the heroic really, really well, which is kind of nice. Like you get in for an attack, you pump in response, they try to get you with that, and you're just like, gotcha, get another one, another trigger. So it just synergized well. It's something that I like to play.
Well, yeah.
And maintains a pretty high play rate in Historic Brawl, specifically in Feather decks, because you can rebuy it. Very popular in those sort of Spell Voltron decks, if you play against like Shu Yun's Silent Prophet in Commander. Mm-hmm. The new Owl Teacher from Strixhaven is another one that you can like rebuy for. It's a 1 mana trick that's effectively a white counterspell that scries a card. It's very powerful.
Very, very good. Let's move on here to number 8. Nerd Girl, what's your number 8?
So my number 8 is a card that I actually don't remember the standard format quite as well, so I'm not sure how much play it saw there, but I know it gets played a ton in EDH. And I actually just borrowed a deck from a friend and played in the Cool Stuff EDH match with Alias. And I ran this card and got to play it. It was super fun. And that is Ashen Rider.
Nice.
It's a bit on the expensive side, but it is 4 mana, 4 colorless, white, black for a 5/5 flyer that when it enters the battlefield or dies, exile target permanent. So, man, will this put in a lot of work. It's super expensive, but in an EDH environment, I think that that's really cool. And the card is just super fun.
It's expensive, but it is affordable because that's $136 right now.
Yeah, that's a shockingly low dollar number
for a mythic in Theros, and that's the only place beyond the Forgotten Realms Commander. It also showed up in there to be a really cool, unique, excellent reanimator target. Like you can blink this thing, like all sorts of cool ways to abuse it once it's on the battlefield.
Yeah, really popular. I mean, black-white reanimator commanders like Athreos.
Athreos is great for this.
Teneb the Harvester.
Mm-hmm.
Things like that are gonna love big beefy idiots that are able to get rid of anything and not just destroy but exile them. Ashen Rider's fabulous.
Yeah, Ashen Rider is terrific. But of all the cards in all the world, of all the cards in the whole block, because we were looking at the block.
Yeah.
And
yes, I was.
Of course you were. And for me and Rube, we just so happened to stumble upon the exact same number 8.
Yeah, it's always weird when we get the same at like a low number. Like exactly the 8th best card from the whole block we feel is this creature.
Right.
And this creature did have its moment in the sun. Very popular in the Devotion
it was very
decks
good.
that it was in.
Yeah.
Extremely good.
You remember it showed up first in a dual deck before the set came out? Remember that?
That's right. I remember that. Yeah. And it had weird dual deck art. I don't like I don't know. It doesn't feel right. But yeah, our number 8 is Polukranos, the World Eater.
It is 2 green, 2 generic mana for a 5/5. Now that was a big deal back in the day. 4 mana, 5/5, and then we start with all the upsides. Oh boy, we were on. Let's do it. 2 green, 2 generic mana for a 5/5 mythic legendary Hydra. It has monstrosity of X. So for a green X generic mana : it says if this creature isn't monstrous, put X +1/+1 counters on it and it becomes monstrous. And when it becomes monstrous, it deals X damage divided as you choose among any number of target creatures your opponents control. Each of those creatures deal damage equal to its power. 2 Polukranos. Urbai fights. It just fights everybody. And most of the time, it just wipes most of their board or gets rid of their best creatures. And Polukranos is fine because that's what Polukranos does. And it takes over the game from there. And that's pretty much what I saw for a long time, for like a year.
Creatures. The red-green monsters deck, popularized by Chris Van Meter, among others. You'd play a Polukranos and then just have 1,000,000 mana because you have Voyaging Satyr with Nykthos, and you were able to make it like a 10/10. Or you could just fight a 1/1. Like, it would be fine to just get your middling value out of it. Not to mention the fact that it combined very well with Bow of Nylea, because you got Death Touch while you were attacking, so the fighting was even better. There was a lot of great things that you could do with Polukranos. The fact that it was a 5/5 for 4, and people were like, what's the downside? And then it was just upside for the rest of the card. Yeah.
Literally 100% upside.
So it's the kind of card you have to read multiple times because there's got to be something wrong with it. Yep. And there just isn't. That was a really fun card, both in limited and constructed for sure.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly. I guess it was like something they did sort of as a promotion for the set, that it showed up in this dual deck that came out like a month or two before the set came out. And like you couldn't play it in standard yet, but like there was this like kind of, like whisper, like this card's actually incredible. Like no one would like say it, and no one was posting any deck lists, but they were talking on forums and stuff like you would back in the day. And this card was fan-freaking-tastic. All right, and it just happens to be our 8th of all the numbers for the set. Okay, for number 7, Ruben, what you got?
I've got my only card, I think, I might be forgetting what set some of these cards are from. I was in a drug-induced haze for most of the 90s, but my number 7, I believe, is the only card not from Theros in the Theros block top 10 of my list. It is from Born of the Gods. It has been featured on many of my lists in the past, and always crops up in places that I don't necessarily expect. It's 1 Pro Tours. It's still in the cube to this day. It's extremely powerful, and Brimaz, the king of Oreskos, usually gets no respect for how good its bona fides are.
I like Brimaz.
Yeah, Brimaz is just a spectacular Magic card, and I don't know, it just never gets the clout that some of its contemporaries get. But it's another card that when you read it, you're like, all right, it's a colorless white for a 3/4 with Vigilance. Legendary creature, Cat Soldier. It's a 3/4 for 3. What are the downsides?
What's wrong with it?
Right. Guess what? No downsides. All upside from here on out. 3/4 Vigilance. Whenever it attacks, create a 1/1 white cat soldier creature token with Vigilance that's attacking, and whenever it blocks a creature, create a 1/1 white cat soldier creature token with Vigilance that's blocking that creature. So it attacks like a 4/5 kind of, it blocks like a 4/5 kind of, and it can snowball out of control.
And you just ask yourself, why did this not see any play? This was one of the money, if not the money mythic, quote unquote, of Born of the Gods. This is where they push the hardest. They push the numbers. They push down the mana cost. This thing was supposed to be, leading the charge, and it just fell flat. It saw almost no play in its entire time in Standard. Maybe a copy here, maybe one in the sideboard against a control deck to try to overwhelm them. But overall, it's just it blew my mind then, and it still blows my mind looking back. It's just like, this wasn't anywhere near the best thing you could be doing in Standard, and this kind of proves it.
I mean, the go wide against Anger of the Gods format's pretty bad. We got Hero's Downfall, which is pretty good when you have like one tall target that does a lot of work on its own.
Yep.
That doesn't like necessarily kind of build from multiple pieces. If you could just kill this thing, then game over. Your entire deck is now botched.
Yeah, feel free to, go ahead.
That's it.
Yeah. I mean, look, you can go back and check out the Magic shows I was making back then. I was flipping over this thing. This was the card you're supposed to flip over. Wizards was pretty obvious in those days. They got a little they both got obvious and kind of less obvious and super duper obvious with their mythics or whatever. But this one was clearly hey guys, it's your money. And you're woo, this is awesome. We're going to crush you. And nope, just not going to see any play.
Fortunately, Brimaz has gotten some additional life in older formats. I see it pop up in Legacy the most often, I think. So it does still get a little bit of its time in the sun.
It's a powerhouse when it's just sitting there hanging out. All right, Nurgle, what's number 7?
My number 7 is Higher, my first of 4 hires.
Ooh, we're about in higher country. Well, my number 7 is not higher on anybody else's list, and that makes it awesome. This is a card that has the right words on it. Sometimes you just need the right words on a Magic card. There's a thing that could be happening in the format. There's a thing that could be getting around in the format. And it turns out that the number one thing, and this card kind of showed up and everyone was like, whatever, seems okay. This card began to rule over tournaments and just completely overtake them because it has the 3 magical words, protection from white. Stormbreath Dragon is 2 red, 3 generic mana for a 4/4 mythic dragon with flying, haste, and protection from white. It has Monstrosity 3 for 2 red and 5 generic mana. So for 7 mana, you put 3+1/+1 counters on it, and it becomes monstrous. And when it becomes monstrous, it deals damage to each opponent equal to the number of cards in that player's hand. It made you suffer when it showed up, and it made you suffer a couple turns later. This card was terrific. It was perfect. You couldn't banish and light it. You couldn't target with any white removal. You couldn't target with any white cards or any white abilities. Nothing. That was the magic that made Stormbreath Dragon fantastic.
Yes, Stormbreath Dragon actually made my list too. I think there might have been a little bit of a mix-up with the accounting. This is my number 5.
Oh no! Well, it's supposed to be...
That's totally fine.
That's cool. Well, I apologize.
Yeah, I loved this. This was the kind of deck I liked to play. It's probably my favorite of the set. Not necessarily the best, but in my heart, this is number 1. I really love these kinds of things. I think I still have a play set.
I think
chilling in my special binder.
Yeah, this is like Chris Van Meter's invitational card without being his invitational card or something. He wrote this thing to many, many tournament victories.
I love this card. This is the red monster of the Polukranos tag team of red-green monsters. You couldn't Banishing Light it. You couldn't chain it to the rocks which was a big deal. Mm-hmm. There was another white, relatively highly played.
I want to say Path to Exile, but was that still...
No, that wasn't. That wasn't still in. There was another one that I'm forgetting.
Condemn or something. There was some...
Yeah, there was another weirdo.
Yeah,
I'll think of it someday. But yeah, and it's also just a 4/4 haste flying dragon for 5, which this was kind of at the beginning of us getting those.
Yeah.
And now we've gotten Glorybringer and Goldspan Dragon, and pretty much reliably we're going to get a 4/4 for 5 haste dragon, and we're going to know it's spectacular. And
they're going to be great every time. Every time. Does weird stuff, still great. Yeah, this card was absolutely...
Reprisal. That's the one.
There we go. All right.
Reprisal was the card I was thinking of.
Fair enough. Well, that means that was technically a higher. That's okay. Moving on to your number 6, where I hit what I thought was a first official higher, and that's also fine. It's great. Nurgle, do you have a number 6?
Also higher.
Also high. Ruben, can you save us for our number 6?
Yeah, I can save you. I mean, I'm assuming I can save you. My number 6 is the only card, as far as I'm aware, that's banned in any format from Theros block. And it is banned from Commander for very good reason, because Prophet of Kruphix is very stupid in multiplayer formats. Am I good?
You're good.
Yes, this is my 7 higher.
Nice.
For exactly the same banned reason.
Exactly. 3 colorless green blue gets you a 2/3 human wizard. So 5 mana for a 2/3 human wizard? Really? That's what we're... Well, hold on. Untap all creatures and lands you control during each other player's untap step. And you may cast creature spells as though they had flash.
But wait, there's more.
But there is.
That's the motto of this card. Right?
Oh, that's true. There's more. There's always more.
There's always more.
There's always money in the banana stand. This card is absurd. Yeah, go ahead.
Nuts. Like EDH games. Like, can you imagine untapping for all the
I've seen them. I was there in the before times when it wasn't banned, and the blue-green deck was just like, it was nasty. Like, everything has flash, so you don't care. Everything fights and interacts with stuff all at instant speed. Like, oh my god, I just saw some craziness happen all the time with this card, and it happened like every turn. It's like they got like a mini time walk as the table kind of did their stuff. They're like, oh, I get to do it again, and I get to activate all my stuff again. And boop, boop, boop. You know, it's like, oh my god. We got to untap the gayest cradles. I saw it, and it was ridiculous.
Yeah, this was also a beating in limited. If you got this and your opponent like played a 4-drop and you went this pass untap, even if they killed it, you still just got to play your Nessian Asp, and it was like fine.
Oh yeah.
So one of the problems that Brimaz had was if they just killed it, you didn't get any advantage out of it. This, while it doesn't have a come into play ability, it kind of fake has a come into play ability. If your opponent's tapped out, you do get an effect. You do get something out of it before it dies.
It kind of protects itself too if you have any sort of counter magic, or I know it's not the same color, but like a God's Willing.
Well, counter spells in this color,
Yeah, there's a lot of counter spells or combat tricks in green. Like, you do have some flexibility just by having this thing be safe for a half a turn.
Like, if it was just lands, you would still be excited about it. But it untaps lands and creatures, and the actual 2 colors that have the most creatures that make mana when you tap them. Oh my god, this was like a $20+ card before it was banned. This is 83 cents or whatever now. But like, this was the hotness, and you had to be ready with a lightning bolt to kill this thing, or God help you. It was crazy. Yeah, this card was nuts. Okay, so that was our number 6. Let's move here to number 5. Ruben, what you got?
My number 5, I believe, is the most popular card from the block in Commander. It has a huge tournament pedigree. It is a beautiful card. It has one of the most unique tokens that's available, and has had its token sort of replicated as sort of an homage on a couple of different places. Most notably to me, the Derek Sheets Invitational token that makes a 2/2 bird for Swan Song.
Ooh.
Swan Song is a blue mana. It's an instant rare from Theros. Counter target enchantment, instant, or sorcery spell. Its controller puts a 2/2 blue bird creature token with flying onto the battlefield. Your spell is now birds.
Yeah, this card was fantastic. Look up the Derek Sheets token on Google. You will love it. It was fun at the time. It's still great. Like, literally today, I was like, should I cash in a rare wild card for this? It's in a whole bunch of Brawl decks. And this is my number 9, by the way, because I absolutely love this card. It's terrific. It's so unique. I mean, my God, even like at the time, I was like, what is happening? Why would you be okay with what this card does? But it turns out sometimes you actually create a clock for yourself that you didn't really mean to, and oops, they birded you to death.
Right.
I looked up the token. It's great.
Isn't it amazing?
Definitely do it. I've never
really
seen that
good.
before.
Yeah, that was good stuff.
That's good.
Incredible work.
Yeah, but just, I mean, think of it for 1 blue mana to counter an enchantment or an instant or a sorcery, just flat out. It's not happening. No ultimatum. Have a bird. Your ultimatum is now birds. Like, that's amazing.
Yeah, back in the day, this was countering gods, turning gods into birds.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, at the commander table, it's, nice overwhelming splendor. It's now birds.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and it's 1 mana, so you're able to protect your creatures from a wrath or do whatever you need to do.
Or a banishing light, or whatever stupid enchantment they're throwing down, right?
And you can wait the one turn, operating a little bit like a God's Willing in that it's able to help protect you. And in decks where that doesn't, the 2/2 bird doesn't necessarily matter too much, along the lines of like rapid hybridization, where you're trading something that they have for a token that could kill you, but the animal is significantly less dangerous.
There you go. So we knew from the past into the future that Nerd Girl's number 5 was Stormbreath Dragon, but that's a great choice. That's a fantastic number 5. Good job on number 5. My number 5 would be countered by Swan Song. My number 5 was the card that snuck up on everyone on the morning of the Pro Tour, at least for those who weren't on pro teams, I guess, as it were, because certainly everybody in the SCG house, everybody at the Pro Tour that happened for Theros, quickly understood that Thassa, God of the Sea, was the best freaking card, or one of the best freaking cards in the set. The mono blue deck, the mono blue devotion deck was absolutely incredible. And as far as I know, no one really knew about it, but all the pro teams knew about it, but no one else really knew about it on the outside. Thassa, God of the Sea. It's a blue and 2 generic mana for a mythic legendary enchantment creature god. It is a 5/5 indestructible. As long as your devotion to blue is less than 5, it's not a creature. At the beginning of your upkeep, you scry 1. I know that doesn't sound like a lot, but smoothing your draws for basically the rest of the game was a big deal. And for a blue and generic mana, target creature you control can't be blocked this turn. And that was also more important. 2 blue, they take, 2 mana, they take 5, right? That's your floor. And it just got better from there.
Yeah. Thassa was unreal. I was fortunate enough to be in the Team StarCityGames.com house for testing when they decided upon this deck, and they were we're going to play Cloudfin Raptor at the Pro Tour, everybody. And I was just like, what is happening? Like, this can't possibly be right. And then I remember being at the event, covering Team SCG, and I forget the man's name, but he was covering Team TCG Player. Mm-hmm. And we were both like, oh, our teams came up with something weird in testing. And then we started comparing notes, and they played the same 70 of 75 completely individually. The testing just came out the same. Which was absolutely wild. I think that one of the reasons why Thassa ended up being such a powerhouse is because the play pattern in the blue devotion decks played out a lot differently than the play pattern in the black devotion decks, because the god came down before the weapon. Thassa being 3 mana, you could go 1 drop with a blue pip, 2 drop with a blue pip, 3 drop with a Thassa, Bident, get to 5 and attack, whereas all the other gods had to wait a turn. So you had a much more aggressive blue deck that you could back up with Dissolve, that you could back up with Swan Song, and it was just something that a lot of the players weren't prepared for and took the tournament by storm.
Master of Waves is a weird card. It makes 1/0s or whatever. 1/0s, right? And that's just weird and odd, but turned out to be the exact right thing it needed to do and make, and it just won a Pro Tour. It freaking destroyed people and was just a pillar of the metagame until it left. That
deck had so many weird cards in it. It had literally Frostburn weird, which itself is a weird card.
Yep.
But there was a 1-drop
was it the owl creature or something? It was the owl.
Judge's Familiar.
Familiar. Yeah.
Judge's Familiar, which, is a piddly little guy, but was exactly what you needed to just get in there.
It was great. All right, let's move on here to number 4. Nerd Girl, what's your number 4?
My number 4 is higher.
Ooh, ouchies. Ruben, what's your number 4?
Let's take a look. My number 4 is also higher.
Oh, I have to save the number 4. That's okay. This card is basically the only card you needed out of the entire set it's in. And for those who were around back then, you know what card I'm talking about. For those who don't, understand that there used to be a big set, little set. And they did that for a long time. And this one in particular, this middle set of Born of the Gods was so bad. Oh Lord, it was bad. But one card was not bad. And that was a good thing. And we're glad it was just rare, because it's still a $4 card. Courser of Kruphix was worth the money and the effort and the time and the attention almost nothing of Born of the Gods was otherwise. You missed literally almost nothing. It's 2 green, a generic mana for a rare 2/4 enchantment creature Centaur. You play with the top card of your library revealed. You may play the top card of your library if it's a land card, and whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you gain 1 life. So having 4 toughness was huge. Gaining life over time was huge. Being able to see what was coming up obviously was great. Being able to shuffle your deck when you wanted to or needed to, that was fantastic. And yeah, you just never had to play a land from your hand anymore. And that was great. And that was awesome. So yeah, this guy was awesome.
There was a big debate at the time as to whether it was it was drawing cards. I always felt like this card drew cards.
Kind of, right?
Because it fixed your future draws. It made you not draw those going forward. A 2/4 for 3 mana is a ludicrous number of toughness for 3 mana. This is one of the reasons why Brimaz never did anything, because this card was on the other side of the table every single time.
Yeah.
Plus, you never lost life to your fetch lands ever again. Your shuffle effects became better. Everything became better. Plus it was an enchantment so that you could trigger your constellation later on and do a whole bunch of other stuff. This card does all the things.
Yeah, I agree that it is card draw. It's great against aggressive decks, whether that be the red or the white version. Honestly, there's nothing not to love about this card, and the reason it saw so much play is just because it is that darn good. And this was definitely in a lot of deck lists I played.
Yeah, it's wild that the big money mythic was stopped by the best rare of the set. It was just like, nah. You really want to get in with your 1/1 as I block your 3/4 forever? Like, okay.
That's still value. Look, I'm still getting in for 1 if you're not chumping my 1/1. So
yeah, but then you just go, I'll just do something else. I'll go somewhere else. Take my ball, go home.
It wasn't a good matchup for Brimaz. It wasn't the best thing for Brimaz to play against.
Fair enough. Let's move here to number 3. Nerd Girl, what's your number 3?
My number 3 is my last hire.
No, Ruben, what's number 3?
My number 3 is a card that I continue to play to this day because it has Defender, and it's Sylvan Caryatid.
There you go.
Colorless and a green gets you an 0/3 plant with Defender and Hexproof. Tap, add 1 mana of any color. The downfall of most mana creatures, your Incubation Druids, your Voyaging Satyrs, even your Llanowar Elves, is that they can be targeted by your opponents. I don't know about you, but I hate it when my opponents target my stuff. Wouldn't it be better if you just didn't have to worry about that? Well, can I interest you in a Sylvan Caryatid? Because it has Hexproof, and that's stupid. Also, being able to fix mana is a big deal. Being able to jump from 2 to 4, of course, is a big deal. This has continued to exist in older formats, not only in, sort of mid-rangey Abzan kind of strategies, but also in Jeskai Ascendancy, where it's kind of the combo piece to go that you keep on tapping with your Jeskai Ascendancy for more mana. It's great. It card's amazing.
It was important that Anger of the Gods killed this. Yes. That was an important part of the metagame. This card was instantly the number 1 mana producer while it was in the format and stayed that way until it left and showed the power of Hexproof and also showed the power of, again, I think, the numbers were very important. It also made 2 power creatures far, far less important or interesting. But that's just what happens when you make this an 0/3.
Yeah, I think your point for the Anger of the Gods comment is pretty key. This was one of the premium targets for that. Like we said, a lot of the other things are X4s, but this was a pretty key piece, and you would want to be killing this for sure.
Yeah. You don't want to let them get to 4 or 5 mana or whatever this thing has to jump to.
Yeah,
gets scary.
It's wild that you had a format that was Stormbreath Dragon, Polukranos, Brimaz, Courser, and still Anger of the Gods was the premier sweeper because you had to get rid of A, the early aggressive stuff, and B, exactly this card, really. I mean, Sylvan Caryatid was one of, if not the main enemy of those decks.
Well, we talk about how important 3 damage is, but also how important 4 toughness is. So it's time to talk about 4 very magical toughness. A creature that got a early nickname, which has stuck around for a time. A creature that they reprinted in Theros Beyond Death, which was also really incredible. Because there is only one Gary in Magic, all right? There's only one of them. And that's Gray Merchant of kicking your Asphodel. That's right. Gray Merchant of Asphodel is 2 black, 3 generic mana for a 2/4 nowadays uncommon zombie. When it enters the battlefield, each opponent loses X life, where X is your devotion to black. You gain life equal to the life lost this way, so it works perfectly in Commander. It scales up nicely. It works perfectly in Standard, where it gives you that nice, sweet payoff at the end for 5 mana to slam down and to drain your opponent a bunch. It's swapped around if you were who's the beatdown. Well, all of a sudden, they're not the beatdown anymore because you just gained a whole bunch of life. And now that your side of the table looks a lot better. I love Mia Gary. This guy's great.
I agree. This was actually one of my hires. This was my number 6.
Nice.
This card it literally just made there was a lot of things I could have chosen when looking at the mono black devotion deck, but this was just kind of the all-star. You can't really make that deck work without this. And also, it was originally printed at Common, and it was a huge beater in Limited. I went to, I think it was GP Oklahoma, and had 3 of these in my sealed pool. Oof. And I was like the scariest person in the building, except for someone who like opened up like triple gods or some nonsense. But like... because they stack on top of each other. It's so insane. Yeah, and then you can bring them back, you can flip them, you can do whatever. Oh my goodness. This will end games of Limited so fast, and I had to put it on my list because it was also good and constructed, which is not something you always see.
Yeah. It is funny, the sort of tape-delayed response that the professional Magic the Gathering circuit had to Mono Black Devotion. A very untuned, you look at the list that made the top 8 of Pro Tour Theros in Dublin, Ireland, and you're like, that's not, I mean, what is happening? But you look at like the rest of the format from then on out, it was, Whip of Erebos. It was what you know of as the Mono Black Devotion deck. One of the most dominant standard decks in recent memory. It's not even that recent of memory. Since Theros came out, it might be one of the top 3 most dominant decks. At least most dominant decks that didn't experience a card banned from it.
Right.
Thoughtseize into Packrat, into Hero's Downfall, into Whip of Erebos, into Gary, into Gary, into Gary, into Gary forever and ever and ever and ever.
Like,
yeah, that's just the game.
One of the most important cards in that deck was a card called Underworld Connections. Underworld Connections was an enchant land aura. For 3 mana, it gave the land tap, pay a life, draw a card. And so when you're drawing cards with your lands, and the thing that lets you draw the cards with your lands also drains an extra 2, thanks to Gary, I mean, it just, all the pieces would come together, and it was ridiculous. Let's move in here to number 2. Nerd Girl, what's your number 2?
So my number 2 was touched on briefly. I was deciding between the Thassa or the other piece, which I like a ton, and that is Master of Waves.
Nice.
It is a 3 colorless and a blue for a Merfolk Wizard. It is a 2/1 with protection from red. It's a Lord for Elementals, and when it enters the battlefield, you make a 1/0 blue elemental creature for each devotion to blue that you have. Yeah, this card kind of came out of nowhere. It was kind of fun and limited, but it was amazing in the blue devotion deck. It was, pretty nice to open them because they were worth a substantial amount at Mythic. So, yeah, it saw a lot of play both in limited and constructed. So that was kind of why I wanted to have it in my top 10 list. And yeah, I like this card.
I'm not 100% sure. I want to say this is true. And Ruben, I mean, you were there. I want to say at the time that like the Pro Tour coverage was like, oh my God, we don't have any elemental creature tokens, or we don't have enough elemental creature tokens for coverage. And then like run and go get some because this thing made a million of them.
Well, yeah, if you have a decent draw of Cloudfin Raptor into Frostburn Weird into Nightveil Spectre into Master of Waves, that's 7 2/1s that you're making.
14 power.
I'm 16 power because itself.
Or 60, yeah, you're right. Goodness.
And it, by the way, itself has protection from red. So you couldn't do anything if you're playing the red devotion deck. It didn't die to Anger of the Gods. It couldn't get targeted by Searing Blaze. Like there's a bunch of stuff, all of the Xenagos shenanigans that you wanted to be doing. Who cares? I got protection from red. And oh, by the way, they stacked. So you would just go turn 4 Master of Waves, give all your elementals +1/+1, and then make more the next turn and grow the ones that are in play already.
It not being a legendary is insane.
Insane. Like Master Waves into Master Waves is like just GG. You need to, like, the Anger of the Gods will kill the elementals, and then they'll play the second Master Waves, and you will feel awful. Yeah, that card was terrific. Ruben, what's number 2?
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say that you don't even need the second trigger of elementals to kill them, just because the additional Lord ability on the first set will just probably kill you.
Mm-hmm.
That was it. Sorry.
Yeah.
Like, it's nice. It's fine. Ruben, what's number 2?
My number 2 is, I'm going to say, the most impactful, expensive Planeswalker that's ever been printed.
Okay.
We've seen 3-mana Planeswalkers be good, obviously. We've seen, and 2-mana, honestly, Planeswalkers be good, if you count Jace Vryn's Prodigy. 4 is kind of the sweet spot, right? We mostly see 4s. Occasionally a 5 will sneak through, be a little impactful. 6 is very tough. It's tough to be a 6-mana Planeswalker out here. But it's not tough for a 6-mana Planeswalker out here if you're Elspeth, Sun's Champion.
Nice.
Elspeth, Sun's Champion is 4 generic white for a legendary Planeswalker Elspeth, who enters the battlefield with 4 loyalty. +1 makes 3 1/1 white soldier creature tokens. -3 destroys all creatures with power 4 or greater. And -7, you make an emblem with creatures you control get +2/+2 and have flying. The play patterns with Elspeth, Sun's Champion were great. They were easy. There were good wraths to be able to play with Elspeth to get rid of the small things. Then you drop her, use the destroy all creatures with power 4 or greater, and get rid of Stormbreath Dragon, and get rid of Polukranos, and be able to keep around your Brimaz or your Courser if you were playing those kind of cards. Or if you were already ahead on board, you could start just churning out this literal army, 3 creatures a turn, up to 5 loyalty when you just drop an Elspeth. And oh, by the way, getting to -7 on this card is relatively easy in the decks that you were trying to play it with, and it effectively said you win the game, because by the time you get there, you have 9 1/1 white soldier creature tokens that are attacking for 27.
Yeah, the play patterns in this card are really interesting, because a lot of times they play Polukranos turn 5, they would activate it turn 6. You would play Elspeth and have chump blockers forever, just chump blockers for days. You would play the Elspeth +1, and then their Stormbreath Dragon couldn't kill it. And then you got to untap and do other things, or play a Wrath, or do something else to try to stop that thing, or just make 3 more 1/1s, and then you had an army of 6 guys, and they had 1 4/4 dragon. Like, there was a whole bunch of reasons why, like, at almost any point in the game, if you had 6 mana, this card was amazing. And it just had all of that impact to be able to wrath the board and or make you a giant wall of creatures so you don't die. This is, I think, probably the benchmark for the best 6-drop Planeswalkers. I mean, Ugin the Ineffable or whatever is good and fine and all, but there's none that really feel right now. Maybe the 6-drop Chandra is terrific.
6-drop Chandra.
But man, Sun's Champion is the real deal.
Yeah, this was my number 4. It saw a fair amount of constructed play. I think it's still kind of a fan favorite for like EDH and stuff. And then it was also insane and limited, which always gives it extra brownie points for me. Yeah. I feel like it's very good as far as value long term and from a limited perspective, but it doesn't come down and instantly win you the game. Like, you still have to grind, you still have to like get some value over several turns, and that is the kind of Planeswalker I'm more okay with in limited. Right. But like, yeah, this was a good card for sure, and this was my number 4.
Yeah, it's my number 6. Like, it didn't win the game immediately. See, your opponent had to pick up their cards first, and then they had to sign a slip. Right. And so that was a whole thing. You could just win the game, then sign the slip, or they had to right-click concede. There was a whole gesture of actions that needed to happen after you resolved it. Yeah, this card was absolutely ridiculous, and I loved it.
Card was beatable. I mean, I've beaten Elspeth.
It's
tough. It's not easy.
It's tough.
Yeah. It's beatable.
But yeah, this is the kind of play pattern of, like, if Liliana Dreadhorde General had seen more play in Constructed, it has the similar kind of play pattern.
Yeah.
Liliana never quite got there. 6-drop, there were 2 6-drop Chandras. One of them was real good. And sort of had a little bit of a similar play pattern, although it was even stickier than this Elspeth was. Mm-hmm. And but I think that this is still the benchmark. This was a finisher for half a dozen different mid-range and control decks.
Yeah, I mean, I guess technically there have been 2 or 3 or 4 6-drop Chandras if you count the Planeswalker decks or whatever.
Sure.
Chandra Blaze was it saw some Pro Tour play, but Chandra Awakened Inferno from M20 is, for me, the real deal. The only card that kind of goes toe to toe with Elspeth and is very powerful. So for my number 2, this card is ridiculous. I also wish they would just like reprint it because it's super expensive. One of the most expensive cards in Theros. It's one of the best cards. Like, as I'm building historic brawl decks, as I have now been addicted to doing so, I have seen this thing show up as a recommendation in so many lists. It's ridiculous how many times you just can just slot in Nykthos, Shrine to Nyx. And it's awesome, and it's perfect, and it was amazing in standard. It was ridiculous and scary, kind of, quite frankly. And it's amazing it didn't get even more scary. Like, it saw a ton of play, and now it sees infinite play in Commander. So Nykthos, Shrine to Nyx, did show up in Theros as a rare. It's a legendary land. They don't make those very much anymore. It taps to add a Wingding, an actual colorless mana. For 2 generic mana, tap : you choose a color, add to your mana pool an amount of mana that of that color equal to your devotion to that color. So it got out of hand pretty quickly. Once you had Devotion or 4 or higher, this thing was gaining you mana, and once you had a Devotion of way, way higher, you started to do really dumb things.
Yep. This was my number 4.
Nice.
All of the decks that were Devotion decks, or at least many of the decks that were Devotion decks, wanted to use that Devotion to do big, ludicrous things. And Nykthos Shrine to Nyx let you do those big, ludicrous things, like, you know, Monstrosity Arbor Colossus, and play big giant X spells and pump with Polukranos 85 times or whatever. Being legendary let you, activate it, make 6 mana, play another one, use that mana to activate it again, make another 6 mana, and go to town. If this card is ludicrous in all the best ways. Also was extremely popular in Pioneer. The mono green Devotion deck in Pioneer with Leyline of Abundance. There it is. And Oath of Nissa. You very and like first turn Land War Elf, you very quickly were making 1 million mana.
Nice. So Nykthos was Nykthos, and I would like to see Nykthos in Arena, quite frankly. I mean, it'd probably show up in Historic, right?
It definitely would show up in Historic.
Definitely show up in Historic. All right, I'm going to turn here to our number 1. Ruben, what's number 1?
My number 1, I assume, has to be in your top 5s. It is the benchmark. It is the go-to. It is the paradigm shifter. It is the thing that changed everything. It is Heroes Downfall.
Nice.
Heroes Downfall first appeared in Theros, and it is the first time that the sentence "destroy target creature or planeswalker" appeared on a Magic card for a colorless black instant rare from Theros.
Yeah, this was my number 3, and for pretty much exactly the same reason. This was the first time we had the kill spell for planeswalkers, and this is right where planeswalkers are starting to get very absurd, like we talked about with like Elspeth. This was a requirement for any deck that could run it, and saw a lot of play. And this card's definitely a staple.
Yeah, this is one of those cards that like I was like, I hope it's on their list because it's like it's important, it's iconic, and you got there, which is great because like I love the spell. I also love just the benchmark. I mean, I was there in the time period between 2007 and 2013 for Theros.
Well, to be fair, I have been corrected. Dreadbore did appear first, but Dreadbore was 2 colors and was sorcery speed. And this was the first, because black for the longest time had no way to do it in mono black, so this was that sort of paradigm shift,
right? So it's a year earlier. And first of all, this is why it's awesome to stream the pre-show and then the regular show. But Dreadbore was also sorcery speed. It was an instant speed, but there was at this point there was a 5-year gap between Lorwyn's release and Return to Ravnica's release to have something destroy target planeswalker. I mean, I asked Wizards, I was like, when are we going to have a card that says destroy target planeswalker? Well, when I asked that question, we had like a dozen or something, or maybe less at the time. And now that we have dozens of planeswalkers, it's not a big deal. Most of the burn spells hit players or planeswalkers or creatures or planeswalkers. But it's important to know where your roots are. But it's also important to know what your stupid, ridiculous, overpowered reprints are, because that is the number one that Nerd Girl and I share. And you know what it is. You know,
Yes.
I know.
I know what it is.
You know what
I know.
it is. Nerd
I
Girl,
don't know
tell
how
us
to-
about it.
I didn't put it on my list.
See?
At all?
No, not at all.
I didn't put Heroes Downfall on mine, so
Well,
touche.
I feel
put
like
it on my list because this card is a Lorwyn card, and I'll cover it when we get to Lorwyn. I
feel like
refuse to acknowledge this reprint.
you can overlook Heroes Downfall because it's not still a staple. Like going back in time, you can think about it, but this is a card that has defined formats and will continue to do so forever. And it should just, I hate these kinds of decks, but it definitely makes so many more decks possible. It completely ruins so many decks' days. And like I said, it just defines formats. So
Our number one's Thoughtseize. It's 1 black mana for a rare sorcery that says target player reveals their hand. You choose a non-land card from it. That player discards that card and you lose 2 life. This is the Infernal Grasp, is the most recent sort of addition to the Thoughtseizing of spells, which is it's the best version that can ever be at the mana cost that it is. I don't want to see the card that's better than Thoughtseize. That scares me. Instead, I want to recognize that Thoughtseize was integral to the mono black devotion deck because no matter what you did against it, you had some sweet sideboard cards that they would get out of your hand on turn 1, and the sadness would soon creep in because then they saw your whole hand. They knew that you had to rip something off the top. Otherwise, they knew your whole hand. This card was insane.
it lets them play around things well. It lets them get the sideboard or biggest threats out, and you can just play perfectly. And also, Thoughtseizes tend to come in multiples, so you're not losing one thing, you're probably losing more. And they could say that this card is lose 4 life, and it would probably still be good.
It really, this was a nice way to benchmark it, but ultimately they could have said 3 life here. It still would have been the best card in Lorwyn. It still would have been an amazing card that defines formats, but here we are.
Yep. It's won multiple Pro Tours across, I think, less than a decade, but still 6 years.
Yeah.
And it's still wrecking house in Historic. The card is in Historic or online on Arena. And so if your kids haven't experienced getting Thoughtseized on turn 1 yet, well, I'm sorry, they're about to.
They're gonna. And that was our top 10 OG Theros cards. Or OG Theros block cards, as it were. You'll see them on the screen right now. If you review, take a look at my list, Nerd Girl's list, Ruben's top 10, and we want to hear from you about what card we did not talk about. And we'll select our favorite to win a $50 gift certificate to CoolStuffInc.com. But before we go, I want to thank my co-host. Thank you, Nerd Girl.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Thank you, Ruben. Yeet.
Yeah.
Move on here to our final slide.
I don't know why I did that.
I don't either. I don't think our sponsor, CoolStuffInc.com, our co-sponsors, CardHoarder.com and UltraSleeves.com, my co-host, Nerd Girl, and Ruben Bressler, you guys for watching and listening. I hope you support us at Patreon.com/MagicMikes. Follow, like, tweet, favorite, share, subscribe to everything social tells people we exist. Catch us online at Twitch.tv at Magic Mikes, on Twitter at Magic Mikes Cast, our Magic Mikes subreddit, and like the Magic Mikes page on Facebook. Or join us here next week, same time, same place, for another episode of Magic Mikes. Good night, everybody.